Big hello from Portland, Oregon. Welcome to another episode of B2B Marketing and More. We are going to talk about innovations today. My guest today is Carla Johnson, and she is a marketing and innovation strategist, keynote, and the author of 10 books. I can barely finish 3.5 books, and she has 10 books. All right. Her latest book is Rethink Innovation, and it's about, you know what? I'm just going to have Carla talk about this. All right, Carla, welcome to my show.
Hey, thank you, Pam. Hello in Portland. I'm from Denver. So we're
Yay!
not so far away from each other.
No, not at all. And it's a direct flight.
Exactly.
Talk to us about your latest book, Rethink Innovation, and what is that book about?
I spent the last 5 years or 5 years before my book was released digging into whether or not the ability to learn how to consistently come up with great ideas is something that could be learned and taught.
Okay.
And the reason that I went down this rabbit hole is because I had so many marketers and even salespeople say to me, I'd like to see these creative things, but I'm just not creative myself. That's just not the kind of person I am. And, you go back to when we're kids, and I can imagine you as a kid in the art room, you're creative, you're doing all these things, you don't have any apprehension, there's
Yeah.
no self-judgment, all of these things. We're super creative. But then as we go through school, the kind of things that we're taught and rewarded for are more about following the norm, following processes, everybody thinking the same. And then you go through university and it's very structured. You get into the work world, and really the way that you scale a business is by taking out inefficiencies. And a lot of times creativity and innovative thinking are considered inefficiencies. And so we end up with adults in our careers who think we aren't creative or innovative thinkers. So that's what I looked at. I did research, I did interviews, I used my own clients as guinea pigs. And I looked at what is the process that some of the most prolific innovators use to consistently come up with great ideas that have an actual bottom line impact. And it's that process, the 5-step process, that's the foundation of my book, Rethink Innovation, which essentially teaches people that innovation is everybody's business. And then here's 5 steps about how you do it.
Fantastic. So the one of the key takeaway, innovation is everybody's business. I think that's especially true in today's world. However, innovations mean different things to different people. Some people think is like, oh, this is a big idea. And some people think that, I'm making innovative step to actually improve our product. So how do you define innovation? And how is innovation different from creativity?
You hit on something really important there, is that innovation can feel like this huge, overwhelming thing. And especially when we hear so much in business about disruptive innovation. And we think that to be truly innovative, it has to be something that turns an industry completely upside down, like Apple did with music, like Uber did with transportation and things like that. But the truth is 90% of innovation happens outside of that traditional product development part of the business. So if that's the case, we're really looking at low-hanging fruit with the entire 90% of the rest of the organization. So what we need to look at is how we can change that perception, how we can rethink innovation and how we define it. Because most people think it's really complex. They think it's time consuming. And to be honest, they don't actually know how to do it, which is kind of weird because so many companies have innovation as a core value. So they're asking people to behave in a way that people don't even know what it is. Back to that definition, to your point. So I define innovation as the ability to consistently come up with new, great, and reliable ideas. It sounds like a very simple definition, but each of those words is really important. So a new idea doesn't have to be new and never ever done before in the world, but it's something that's new to your industry, to your line of business, to your vertical. So for example, McDonald's studied the layout and design of a Formula One pit stop, and then they use that as inspiration for their drive-through food service area.
To standardize it to make it quicker and faster turnaround.
Exactly. So was it absolutely new and never been done before? No, but they took inspiration from another industry and they brought it into their own. But that new idea isn't enough just to be innovative, because we've seen all sorts of failures just because it was a new idea. I mean, look at New Coke. That wasn't necessarily innovative on its own.
That did not help. Yes, I hear you.
The next characteristic is that it's a great idea. And I'll be honest, Pam, this criteria is a little bit more subjective.
Yeah.
But I think about what David Ogilvy, how he describes a great idea. It's one of those that makes you a little envious and kind of jealous that you didn't think of it yourself. You hear it and you go, "Oh man, that's so great." Yeah, I wish I had thought of that. Maybe the
Oh my God. Why didn't I think of it? Yeah. That happens all the time.
even a new and a great idea aren't enough to be innovative. And it takes that third characteristic, and that's a reliable idea.
Yeah.
And a reliable idea, to make it innovative, is something that actually has a financial impact on the business. It doesn't necessarily mean it has to be this disruptive, skyrocketing growth overnight, but it could be those kind of incremental tweaks here and there that help generate a little more revenue, help save a little more time, money, efficiency, expense here.
Optimization, the improvement part of it.
Exactly. It's that consistency, because a lot of times what makes a truly innovative organization is that there's all of these employees consistently looking for opportunities to implement new, great, and reliable ideas. And that's that fourth characteristic of consistency. And that's really the difference between those, one hit wonders with a great idea and those people who are truly perpetually innovative, is that they're able to consistently come up with ideas that are new, great, and reliable, and to implement those. That's how I define innovation, because it's something that everybody can relate to.
Yeah.
And it removes that complexity. It has to be massively time consuming. And then the 5-step process that I've developed gives people a specific process to follow so that they know how to do it.
Sometimes I equate innovation with creativity. What is your thought on that?
You can't have innovation without creativity, that's for sure. And it's an interesting dynamic, because lots of businesses look at creativity and they think of it as, oh, it's nice to have, oh, isn't that creative? But they limit it really to like the graphic designers in the marketing department, or even the marketing department themselves. And then they act like, okay, now we're getting down to serious business. We don't need the creatives in here. We need innovation. And so you can't have innovation without creativity, because creativity is a lot about originality. It's,
Creativity is kind of like a fuel to the innovation in a way.
in a way, you could almost look at creativity as a loss leader, but it drives innovation. And innovation is really when you take those ideas and you put them into a process, you're able to implement them, measure them, you have a specific outcome, or you're working toward that. Not every idea is implementable, but I think there's also the dynamic where there's a perception that coming up with the idea is the easy part, executing it's the hard part.
Yeah.
But what people miss is that you need to start out with a better idea in the first place. And also, you need ideas all the way through execution and implementation. So it's that ability to be able to connect the dots and take learnings from other experiences that you have, other industries, other situations, and understand how to apply that into the work that you do really every single day.
And you mentioned there are 5 steps that people can take. Can you also talk to us about that?
I will start first with the 5-step process. And it's called the Perpetual Innovation Process. And the reason I call it that is because this is the process that these perpetually innovative people used over and over and over again. And it was really interesting, Pam, is I would talk to somebody about, this is an amazing idea that you had, campaign, had phenomenal outcomes. Tell me how you came up with that idea. And they would say, I don't know, it just came to me. So what I realized is that I needed to go to that end result and say, what were you doing before that? And what did you do before that? And reverse engineer it.
Reverse engineer back. Yes, I was going to say that. Yeah.
Yeah. Because in a lot of cases, like even with you, if I said, how did you come up with the idea for your last book? Maybe you could go back to that initial bit of inspiration, but a lot of people couldn't just off the top of their head. And so by reverse engineering it, what I found through all of these interviews and through this research is that everybody followed the same process, whether they realized it or not. So then when I went back to the people who I had asked where they got the idea, the inspiration for their idea, and I walked them through this process, they said, yeah, that actually is what I do every single time. I just didn't realize it. And so the 5-step process that people use is: first, they observe; second, they distill; third, they relate; fourth, they generate; and fifth, they pitch. So when we break down each of these steps, the first step is observe. And it's interesting, and I know that you've noticed this, especially with creative people, they're highly, highly observant
Yeah.
of these little minutia details that a lot of us miss. And you know what? It's right here in our hand is a big culprit. It's my smartphone, and it's our attention gets narrowed into these very small tasks or digital devices all day long. But really creative and especially innovative people are highly, highly observant of the world around them. And if we go back to that childhood where kids are in art class, it's crazy the things that they notice and what they observe. And if you've ever been around a young child, the things that come out of their mouth, you're like, oh my gosh, how did they notice it? Now they're telling the world about it. It's something that's very natural to us, but we learn just to filter out all of these things, or we let digital devices absorb all of our attention. But it's time that we relearn how to use all 5 of our senses and observe the world around us. So then we go from observation into the next step, which is distill. And in the second step, we're distilling all of these things that we have observed into patterns. And what those patterns look like can be completely random, completely don't seem to make sense. But the interesting thing that I found through my research is that especially these first 2 steps of observing and distilling, they're very genetically natural to us as humans as a part of survival. So if you think clear back to our ancestors, the reason that they were able to survive and lead to our lineage is because they were very good at observing the world around them. They would go out on the savannah and they would observe, are birds very calm and just hanging out in the trees? And are the antelope grazing and chilling? Are the antelope running by fast and the birds are flying away? And so they're observing all of these things and distilling them into patterns of safety, patterns of danger, patterns of weather changing, and things like that. So once people start to reawaken their ability to observe, your brain will naturally distill it into these patterns. And then the third step, I think, is almost the most important, because even if people start to observe and distill, unless they understand how to relate it into the work that they do, their new ideas can still come across as copycat or cut and paste from what another brand is doing. And relate is really looking at those patterns that you've distilled and relate those patterns into the work that you're doing. So for example, you and I have a great friend named Tim Washer, and Tim is a comedian.
Super funny. I love him.
He is. He's hilarious. He's hilarious. And he's worked with some of the best of the best. Conan O'Brien. He was a writer for Amy Poehler on Saturday Night Live Weekend Update, that level of comedian. He was a creative director at Cisco for a while, and he had a new product launch to do. And like a technology company, you don't think of them as doing amazingly creative and innovative product launches. It's usually an executive or an engineer talking about the features and all of the new things that customers can do because of this product. But Tim said, let's do something really different and innovative. Then he happened to be in a comedy club in New York City one night, and the comedian Ray Romano was on stage. And Tim kind of sat back in his chair and he really observed the whole audience, not just Ray as a comedian and a performer. But he said as he watched it, he observed how Ray moved on the stage, and he observed the body responses and how people began to lean in as Ray went through his routine. Ray talked about things like family and in-laws and kids and all of these things that people could really relate to in a short amount of time, but all through humor. And as Ray got people to laugh in the audience, everybody's emotional wall started to go down.
Mm-hmm.
As Tim looked at that, all of these things that he observed, he distilled it into patterns of being able to build relationships very quickly with people that most likely Ray didn't know. I mean, they knew of him. And then talking about things that were very familiar, doing it with humor And it was this laughter that got people to lower their emotional walls and be willing to hear things that they normally wouldn't hear. So it was those patterns that he related into his work. Now, the next step is generating ideas. So now when Tim went to generate an idea for this product launch, he said, how can we use humor to talk about something that everybody knows, but in a way that gets them to laugh and lower their emotional walls? And that's how he used humor to do a video for the product launch, which happened to come out right around Valentine's Day. And so instead of having an engineer talk about how fantastic the ASR 9000 router is, he made it into a Valentine's Day video that talked about the ASR 9000 router being the perfect Valentine's Day gift. And you think about putting this router right up there with diamonds and jewelry and flowers. It worked fantastic.
It certainly stands out.
Exactly. But because he was able to tell the story of what he observed, the patterns he noticed, how that related into the work, how that generated his idea, that was his pitch. The pitch is actually to go back and walk through each of these steps, and you have a natural story structure to it. And this is what works so well for Tim.
In general, when people try to come up with consistent and reliable ideas, for these 5 steps, do you actually have any insight in terms of where people spend the most time subconsciously or unconsciously?
If people don't understand the 5 steps, the place that they spend the most time on is generate.
We need something. We need something now. Let's spend time generating it.
Let's brainstorm, like throw it all up on the wall. And you know what happens? It's disjointed, it's weird. Nothing really great ever comes out of it. It's either something that's a rehash or it's been watered down so much that it's not really unique, creative, innovative at all. And so when people go back and they do these first 3 steps, they find that the generate step then happens like this, so automatically. And instead of spending all of this time in the generate step to have something to pitch that's really crappy, to be honest, they go back and they start to observe. And the interesting thing about this is, to your question, where do people start to spend the most time? It's hard to tell, because once you remind your brain to observe things around you, you do it so much all the time that you don't even realize you're doing it. And your brain will start to do the observe and distill so fast, you don't keep track of it because you just are a more observant person. But I think the piece where the reward pays off the most is the relate step. And that's where you really look at what worked in these other scenarios and how do I really make it apply to what I'm trying to accomplish with whatever my charge is right now, a new campaign, a new strategy, a new whatever that may be. Because it's that ability to understand how to take what works behind another provocative idea or situation and truly relate it into your own work like Tim did, that really shows that extraordinary idea.
In your book, you also mentioned about we can be a different types of innovators.
Yeah.
What are they? Why are understanding what type of innovator you are critical?
What I've seen with other types of innovation work is that they talk about the type of person or the role throughout the innovation process. And I think the interesting thing about that is that lots of us have to be involved in executing our ideas all the way through. It's not just that we put on a different hat at a different stage. We are who we are. And how people come to the table with ideas can be very, very different. And in order to get those ideas out the door and executed, we have to understand how people look at ideas. Because I come from a family of very left brain engineers, and I'm very right brained. Now, am I a better or worse innovator because I'm right brain versus left brain? No, it's just that I'm different. And so when you look at the difference even between like a Bill Gates and a Steve Jobs,
They are very different, even though both are not innovators, but they approach things differently and they probably are different archetypes too.
so the difference between an archetype and a role is that an archetype that's how you were born. So if you think about somebody who says, we really need to figure out how this is going to work across our team. And somebody says, well, let's ask Pam because Pam is such a people person. Now, that's not your job title, right? Your job title doesn't say, hey, I'm a people person, but that's who you are.
Your personality trait.
Exactly. Exactly. This is how you show up in the world. And a role is more, this is a behavior that we want you to perform based on your job title. And so when we look at archetypes, there are certain people who are just naturally more strategic. They can see the blueprint and know what needs to be done and get it out the door just like that. I call it their natural genius is strategy and planning. So I think that's something that's more commonly understood when it comes to innovation and the value of that role. Now, the next one is a collaborator. And a collaborator is one who's just excellent at being able to bring people together on different teams across the organization, even collaborating within the same team, because there's people with different dynamics on the same team. And we look at that, and that is so important when it comes to ideas and to innovation and making them actually happen, because a lot of times why an idea doesn't go anywhere is because people are butting heads and there's not collaboration. Now, the third one is the culture shaper, and they are fantastic at communicating change. And when we look at, especially in marketing, there's more of an appreciation for storytellers and that rise of change and how they actually structure the narrative of what's going to happen. So when we look at it in the context of innovation, we're looking at that culture shaper as someone who can plan that narrative, that story about where are we today, where do we want to go, and how do we get to where we're going, so that people understand that they do have a role and a part in whatever is being done. Now, the fourth one is a psychologist. And a psychologist is somebody who has such empathy. That's their natural genius. They understand, in a way, what it's like to be the consumer of an idea. And they look at it from the people side of things. And how will it be to use this idea, whether that idea is a product, whether it's a process, whatever it may be. They really bring that human element into this world of innovation. In a way, they focus on unstructured innovation, other than the processes and things that are very considered hard and rigid or, process oriented. They're very much about the people part of innovation. Now, the fifth one is an orchestrator, and their natural genius is that they are fearless leaders. You see this in organizations many times, especially team dynamics. You can see an issue that goes from early, later into the process, and everybody knows there's a conversation that needs to be had, but nobody wants to have it. Orchestrators are great at having those uncomfortable conversations early in the process. And they have this sort of like sixth sense of understanding how to navigate all the political stepping stones within an organization. They're great at, like a collaborator, reaching across the aisle and understanding how to work the system so that innovation can actually happen. And then the last one is a provocateur. And Pam, I'm guessing that's probably you, because the natural genius of the provocateur is someone who's always pushing the status quo. And I think they're easy to identify in a meeting because they're the ones who say, wait a minute, have you ever thought about, fill in the blank? Have you thought about doing it this way? Have you ever looked at this?
And people don't usually like to invite me to the meeting, and there's a reason behind it.
But when we all start to understand and appreciate the different characteristics of these archetypes, then when you have someone like a provocateur in a meeting, it doesn't feel so much like sandpaper sometimes. It's not like, oh, here they go. Here goes Pam again. She's got another idea. You start to understand and appreciate how it all works together. And I know sometimes provocateurs really partner well with strategists, because strategists, bring some reality and structure to all of those prolific ideas that come about. And so is anyone right or wrong? No, but what we need to look at is how we bring the dynamics of how each of these six archetypes think when we look at how we're more innovative, so that we can increase the chances that these ideas will be successful, not only in getting approval, but also in execution.
The 6 archetypes, and that's great. And I understand on your website there is a very short assessment that people can take to identify who they are. Can you talk to us about that assessment that people can go to and just like very curiously find out what is the archetype they belong to?
If you go to my website, it's Carla with the C, carlajohnson.co. There's no M, just .co. And on that homepage, you'll see a big area. It says, find your innovation archetype, and it lists what the 6 archetypes are. So you can take the assessment. It's about 6 questions long. Then it takes you to a landing page, and it gives you in-depth information, not only about your own archetype, but how you interact with the other 5 archetypes. So I always suggest not only you take it, but have your team take it and talk about the results and how you see some of these things playing out in different situations. It can be times when you're going through strategy planning. I know we're early in the year and that's a big thing. It can be when you're under pressure and need ideas fast. How do you do this? You know what? It can be during a time when everything feels rote and just repetitive and you really lack inspiration. And that's the case with a lot of teams right now. It feels like we've had our heads down for so long.
And then we're being kind of like locked down. We cannot meet.
This is really an interesting way to start to look at how can we, I hesitate to say shake things up, but how can we bring greater awareness to how we function as a team and maybe infuse some inspiration and excitement in a way that's different, but doesn't disrupt all of this work that we still have to have done every day.
Check out the assessments on carlajohnson.co. Start with C, carlajohnson.co, and do your assessments and find out who you are. Strategist, collaborator, culture shaper, provocateur, psychologist, or orchestrator.
And what also happens is people will say, actually, I see myself in all of these. And it's that they're used to being in situations where they really need to fill that point of view of another archetype to be successful. Now, you as a strategist, I can definitely see. And as an orchestrator, that's actually the rarest of all of the archetypes. Only 8% of the people who've taken the assessment come out as an orchestrator. And when you do take the assessment on the landing page, it gives you the percentages.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've had thousands of people take this assessment, and it may vary a percent or two over time, but roughly those percentage breakdowns that you'll see in the pie chart on the landing page does stay true pretty much. And I've had it up about 2.5 years.
Do you actually have any recommendation in terms of what people can do on a regular basis to kind of like enhance their innovation ability?
Just take 5 or 10 minutes every day and just sit real still.
I'm doing that now. No, I'm kidding.
Use your 5 senses and take in, observe everything around you. Even if you're sitting in your car, are there little sounds and creaks that you don't usually notice? How does the seat feel? I did this in my car the other day when I was driving, and I thought, my car's 8 years old. The seats don't feel quite like they did 8 years ago. And, you hear little sounds. And even when you breathe in, sometimes there is a taste that you don't realize is there. So taste doesn't necessarily even have to be food or drink or something like that. When I'm out in the Colorado mountains hiking and you breathe in, you smell that pininess, but you can also taste it a little bit. And sometimes people say, I don't have time to observe, or their mind just goes so much.
We are in front of our phone so much and also in front of our PC so much. We are like screen time basically consume us. And I 100% agree with you. There are times we just need to get away and be very observing in terms of what's actually happening around us.
Yeah, to your point, the screen time has actually narrowed our vision to be exactly like this. And so all of these things can be happening from here on out, and we don't even notice them because we've trained ourselves to have tunnel vision.
I know. Is that sad? That is so sad.
It's the clash between efficiency and productivity and being able to absorb and have that time. I heard John Cleese one time talk about people say they don't have any time to do these things. He said, literally just set a timer. He suggested 15 minutes, which I think also is a great bare minimum, because I know I waste way more than 15 minutes of my day throughout the day. So I know I can take 15 minutes of it and just sit and observe. And I tend to do meditation also, even if I just sit, close my eyes and breathe in and out, and you start to notice all of these things about the tension that you hold in your body and things like that.
Lovely. I love that advice. Now I'm going to wrap it up. And can you tell us where we can find your book?
You can find information about my book on my website, carlajohnson.co. You can also find Rethink Innovation anywhere that you buy great books. You can Amazon, Barnes and Noble, hopefully some of your local bookstores. I'm a big fan of supporting local bookstores. When you buy it, you can come to my website and click on the book link and input your information. And I have some free bonuses for people who have bought the book. You can get instant access to all of those, including one of the free bonuses is a PDF of the book if you want to start reading it right away. Because I know some people buy it, or, they want the print copy, but they want to see things right away. So they wonder about the Kindle versus print. So if you buy the print, actually, if you buy the Kindle too, you can get access to that right away and start reading.
So people can also find you on all social media channels as well.
Yeah, social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. I'm carlajohnson.co as well there.
Now, I'm going to ask one silly question. We talk about meditation, and then the question I'm going to ask you is, what kind of show are you binge watching?
What kind of show? I am binge watching Community with my kids.
I love Community. Oh my God, I watched that twice.
Back to our power of observation is the writing.
Very short, very punchy, very quick.
You see a little bit different archetypes in each of those.
Well, thank you so much for coming to my show, Carla. It's wonderful to have you. So much appreciate that you spend so much time looking into innovation and also the different personality, how we can do and be innovative better on a regular basis.
Thank you. It's always a joy and a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks for having me.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Never miss an episode of B2B Marketing and More by following us here on YouTube and leave a comment while you're at it. You can also find episodes wherever you get your podcasts.